anti-imperialist politics is here to stay in Latin America. We can't say that about Africa. The picture, however, is much more encouraging in Latin America.
Thanks very much for joining us, Glenn.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
Okay, did you catch that? That South America is the new bastion of hope for anybody who cares about people. You know, they talk about left versus right, and the new left entrenchment in South America is going to be permanent, they say. Venezuela and so on like that. And if you are thinking that that's a bad thing, then you're probably not educated enough about the subject to make a decision, because that's a very good thing. Now, we're going to move on. Remember Zbigniew Brzezinski and his 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard? I pointed out before that unabashedly, unashamedly lays out exactly what's going on right now. Well, we haven't heard from Zbigniew for a long time, but you know, now he's the behind-the-scenes advisor for Obama. So if anybody wonders what agenda Obama might be planning to follow, you only have to read The Grand Chessboard. But it turns out that the neocons didn't do it right. They didn't do it the way Zbigniew wants. And here's a two-part interview about The Grand Chessboard, just done by the Real News Network. Now, you just don't see this type of news on any of our stations, do you? Check this out. This is news that matters. So here's our cut number 3.
For more than 50 years, Zbigniew Brzezinski has been one of the most influential thinkers and actors in setting U.S. global policy. He advised Presidents Kennedy, Johnson, and Reagan. He recruited the then little-known governor of Georgia to the shadowy Trilateral Commission and went on to become President Carter's national security advisor from 1976 to 1980. Brzezinski was at the center of U.S. power during the fall of the Shah of Iran, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, the normalization of relations with the People's Republic of China, the building of the MX missile, and the Camp David Accords. In his 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard, Brzezinski laid out in surprisingly unambiguous language his vision for America and the world. For America, the chief geopolitical prize is Eurasia. America's global primacy is directly dependent on how long and how effectively its preponderance on the Eurasian continent is sustained. About 75% of the world's people live in Eurasia, and most of the world's physical wealth is there as well, both in its enterprises and underneath its soil. Eurasia accounts for about 3/4 of the world's known energy resources. America's withdrawal from the world, or because of sudden emergence of a successful rival, would produce massive international instability. It would prompt global anarchy. The most immediate task is to make certain that no state or a combination of states gains the capacity to expel the United States from Eurasia or even to diminish significantly its decisive arbitration role. I interviewed Professor Brzezinski at the Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington, where he's a resident scholar. The question: why is the United States fighting a war in Afghanistan? Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Washington, D.C. And joining us now is Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
The argument in the book, if I try to paraphrase a little bit, is that the United States, in order to oppose forces of what you call global anarchy, for the sake of world stability, needs to maintain its dominance in the world for a generation or even longer. And the key to this dominance is Eurasia. Eurasian strategy for the United States is, essentially, you say, will determine whether or not it remains preeminent. What is America's Eurasia strategy right now? And what is the Afghan war, what's its role in this?
Let me just add that in the book, I also say that American preeminence may not endure indefinitely, and that in fact, if we conduct policies that are unwise, that are historically, so to speak, out of tune with the times, we could fumble the ball, so to speak. And I'm afraid that to some extent that concern is now being validated namely that in the wake of 9/11, we responded in a fashion that aggravated the challenge and that engaged us in an undertaking, the end of which is difficult to define, but the consequences of which, if we do not end it somehow before too long, could be devastating. Namely, we are engaged in what I think I call for the first time in this book, but I've called it many times since then the same way. We're engaged in what I call the global Balkans. The Balkans in Europe were that part of Europe which was internally weak, torn by a variety of conflicts, ethnic, religious, and territorial, into which great powers tended to be sucked in. Now the global Balkans extend from east of Suez to west of Xinjiang, to south of Russia's new border, which is north of Kazakhstan, all the way down to the Indian Ocean. It encompasses an area of about 550, 600 million people. And now, sad to say, in that turbulent area, we are the principal protagonist.
And why is it necessary? Why is U.S. dominance in that region important?
Dominance means ability to manage. Being embroiled is not the same thing. I, for example, feel that we have overdone the military involvement. But I do think that our ability to manage the various conflicting interests and powers in this huge continent of Eurasia is central to our stability and security. But it doesn't mean that we have to be engaged militarily.
Now, you talk about the enormous wealth of the region, the importance of pipelines. Why is that important for America to be the arbiter of all of this?
Well, again, I don't say America ought to be the arbiter of this, but I do think that it's important for us to recognize that the management of resources is very important in the distribution of global power, and that other parts of the world in which we have either an interest or a close relationship with, such as the Far East, Japan and China, or in the West, Europe, if they become dependent on a single power, that this could be destructive, damaging, and even precipitate conflicts. And therefore, for example, diversity of sources of energy is a source of security.
What is the Obama Eurasia policy then?
Well, that's a very good question. You ought to ask him.
Well, he was talking to you. Is he still? I don't know. Let me ask you frankly, did he ask your advice on whether to send more troops?
I couldn't, if I said yes, that would be distortion, but I was involved in some fashion in discussions, including within the White House, regarding the decisions he made.
But what do you make of the
I don't
thinking?
think that my input was all that significant, because I know from personal experience that the really significant input comes from those people who are on the spot, who interact on a daily basis, who debate the options, engage in them. An advisor who's called in from outside, maybe even just out of politeness, is not a decision maker. So I have no illusions. Now, what do I think of the policy? I think he had no choice. He inherited a situation. The question is, can he now manage it in such a way that it ceases to be an endless morass, something that we get bogged down in? And I think that is the real challenge.
The idea of Eurasia as the key to U.S. global power, is that the driving reason to be in Afghanistan?
No, I think the driving reason to be in Afghanistan, and the specific reason, is that a major attack on the United States originated from a safe haven that existed in Afghanistan. We gave the then Afghan regime, which happens to have been a Taliban regime, the option of either terminating the safe haven and handing over to us those who attacked us, or becoming the object of an unavoidable military action designed to eliminate that safe haven, in particular Al-Qaeda. They chose the latter option. That's why we're in there.
In the book, you talk about the importance of Pakistan and Afghanistan and Turkmenistan and the whole issue of the energy. The argument is made, I mean, obviously you've heard it, that whether Al-Qaeda has a safe haven in Afghanistan or whether it's North Waziristan or whether it's somewhere else, whether it's Hamburg, this can't be just about whether Al-Qaeda has a place to launch attacks from, because it can launch attacks from many places. There has to be something more in terms of this strategic vision.
Well, wait. I don't know whose vision you're talking about, because Obama didn't go into Afghanistan. Someone else did, right?
Right.
8 years ago.
Yeah, although for some reason